I mean, it's pretty evident that we could benefit from a gypsy curse. Because we're fat as fuck.
It's true.
And apparently, you could get thinner. Or should I say, thinner, which is how I remembered it being said.
And it was never said that way.
But it was not said like that. Now, we want to know what the fuck we're babbling about. We're actually talking about Thinner, the adaptation that came around. What year was it?
I think it was 94.
Yeah, 94, 95, somewhere around there.
Mid-90s, yeah.
From Tom Holland, a horror legend of sorts, at least to horror fans. He's no big name like John Carpenter, but he's relatively big to horror fans. And this was one of his 90s offerings. And it was probably, I wouldn't say probably, it was a pretty maligned film. Yeah. Critically, financially, etc.
Currently sits at a 33%. On Metacritic, it doesn't even have a tomato score.
Yeah, it wasn't well received by critics. I will say this, though. A lot of the criticisms brought by professional critics towards the movie, I felt that they kind of missed the point. And a lot of the criticism, though fair, was that the characters were thoroughly unlikable. And that's kind of the point, you know. But I could get that being grating. Now, that being said, is this movie worthy of criticism or not? As an adaptation and as a standalone movie all its own. We're going to talk about that because this is the next episode of Stephen King Shitter Hit. We're two fat fucks decide whether... I haven't used that intro in a while. We're two fat fucks decide whether a Stephen King adaptation is hit or a piece of shit.
Yep. It was 96, by the way, in case anyone...
96. Speaking of years...
was holding on to that.
Speaking of years, it was 1985, and the jig was up. Stephen King had been writing books as Richard Bachman for a couple of reasons. One, he wanted to know if he could actually, sell stuff without any of the hype, because he was and still remains one of the biggest authors in the world. And two, he kind of wanted to, experiment a bit with the structure of publishing back then. Basically, back then, it was very unusual for a writer to publish more than one book a year, and he had tons of ideas. So he did the Richard Bachman bit, but somebody figured it out, and they figured it out just a little bit after Thinner was released. So Thinner was a relatively low seller until everybody was like, hey, that's a Stephen King book. The unfortunate part is that of the original 5 Bachman books, Thinner's the least good of them. But it has a small audience, and I'm among that small audience that really enjoys it. And I'll tell you why it's the least good. It's not that the book itself is not good. It's that the book is it's not his most subtle work. It's pretty blunt and to the point, but it's intended to be that way. And therein lies kind of the trapping of it. It's a legitimate literary move he made, but it wasn't flattering towards his style. When we know he's long-winded, as I am at the moment.
Yep.
But
it describes fat people in disturbing detail.
Yeah, and it's not that he was in terms of the nuances of writing, it wasn't subtle as it usually is, and in terms of the point of the book, it was blunt. But the book is supposed to be a nasty affair, and it's supposed to not be a filled with likable characters. The whole point of the book is that everybody is an unlikable piece of crap. The book's main theme is willful ignorance. We all have that nasty habit of looking away to things that might interfere with our lives. Be it the bum on the street asking for money, I'm just not going to look at him, and it'll be forgotten about the moment I walk past it, and I won't feel any guilt for it. Or be it some illness that comes down on us. We choose to ignore it until it's impossible to ignore. And the book deals with that, and it shows how everybody, every character, no matter what, is responsible for that. So there are no good guys in the book. In fact, the most relatable character in the book is a mafioso guy, so that tells you something. And I think that translated somewhat well to the movie, but I do think they try to soften the main character of Billy Halleck a lot. And it's kind of hard to soften a complete shithead, so he still comes off as kind of a shithead. So, that's kind of the problem with trying to adapt this book. But let's talk about this. The plot is simple. A guy, a well-to-do lawyer, an obese man no less, basically runs over a gypsy.
Pretty much.
That's basically the plot. Runs over a
it.
gypsy and is cursed by the gypsy's ancient fucking father, and he has to deal with the consequences of his deeds for the first time. Basically, he's held responsible for something he does. He can't ignore what is in front of him, though he tries. But anyway, what was your overall impression? This is the first time you've seen this, right?
I have either seen this before, or there, like many other Stephen King works, there's got to be like a Simpsons version, because I knew the structure pretty well.
And it is a familiar structure, and this might inform you a bit on that. The book was influenced by an old movie called Night of the Demon, and it's notable because that movie also influenced another movie by Sam Raimi called Drag Me to Hell, which, if you see Drag Me to Hell, which we will be exploring as that is a horror classic, Drag Me to Hell was, you could say, it was very heavily influenced by both Thinner and Night of the Demon, because it's a kind of a conglomerate of both. So that may have... It's a familiar story, So it's either that or it's just one of those that...
I actually asked Spielbergo if there was a Simpsons version.
Mm-hmm.
Because apparently that's a theme with the Simpsons. There's always a King ties. But he says he doesn't remember. So there's a loose tie there. If anyone wants to bring it to a close, feel free.
But what was your overall impression there? Besides remembering...
Yeah. Like I told Spielbergo, it's not great. It's not a great movie, but it's pretty fun.
Yeah,
I thoroughly enjoyed it,
and that's kind of my stance on this. And it remains so upon rewatching it. It's not a good movie.
Yeah,
but it's not a bad movie.
No, it's not bad,
and it's not great, but it's kind of shitty.
It is,
but it's the kind of shitty you can enjoy.
Yeah.
So we're not. This is kind of like a first. Yeah. We're gonna call it a shit. That's kind of a hit. Even though it wasn't financially a hit or a critical hit, but to me anyway,
it's the first combo.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a shitty movie you can enjoy. Period. Yeah. But
it's an S hit.
Let's talk about this little sucker here. The movie is a pretty straightforward adaptation as far as the events of the book. Some things are reshuffled around to make them more fluid, i.e., the relationships between our main character, the lawyer, and his associates and, kind of like peers. That is to say, the judge, the sheriff, and the mafiosi. Their relationships are made a lot more clearer in the movie than they are initially in the book. The book starts after the events, after he's run over the gypsy. But, that's a good choice to do for this movie because there was I wouldn't say there was a lot to get to the screen, but they managed to fit a lot of the book in there. Would I say that benefited or not? Sure. I do feel the movie goes by at a kind of like quick pace.
Yeah.
Like it's really like moving from one... I'll say it this way. Like 175 to 200 pages of the book happen relatively quick to get to the last third of the book, know? But then again, in the book, really we revel in our main characters and the other characters' inability to accept what is happening. So that they do it at a speedy pace in the movie makes sense.
Yeah.
But I also think it kind of affects the, the uncomfortable mood of it that it could have had. So as a result, it just becomes kind of something you enjoy watching.
Yeah.
For kind of like the hokiness.
Like it could have been more like body horror-y.
Yes, and that's one of the big... I'm glad you brought that up. This should have been a body horror movie. I mean, it technically is.
It is,
but
not really.
Yeah, it doesn't indulge in it like someone like Cronenberg would.
Yeah.
It doesn't even get close to that, and that's one of the big things about it. The book, though it handles these issues of willful ignorance and it deals a lot with human nature, it couples that with some grotesque body horror. You are really uncomfortable at how his body is deteriorating, and then the judge, you don't even see the judge. You see him in the movie, which was pretty cool, and that effect was pretty cool, but we'll talk about that. But just hearing the description from his wife's mouth which worked pretty well in the
Yeah,
movie
it
too.
was pretty effective.
In the book, it's just chillingly appalling. You don't even you don't want to touch yourself because you're like, I might get that fucking thing. And likewise with the sheriff, you get that same feeling
You're a gypsy.
of disgust. And I think they kind of dropped the ball on that a bit. You don't feel our main character's reluctance to believe that the curse is real. In fact, he kind of gets to the point of him believing it's the curse pretty quick.
It's like other people that don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a way to balance it, but I think it really stole something of an impact from that, that willful negligence of oneself just to keep the idea that, oh, I'm fine. We do that a lot as humans. So, I think kind of that detracted from it. What do you think of how they handled the body horror?
Well, it wasn't great. When I was watching, I was like, I could think of a Cronenberg, and it being more like a disgusting discovery as it goes along.
Yeah.
But he's pretty quick to be like, well, he is like apprehensive to say it's that at first, but then once he sees the first guy, he's like, okay, it's a curse.
Yeah.
Instantly. Which I guess makes sense. Like, why would you be like, oh, this is,
Again, the revelation came at the right time that it did in the book. It's just how quick they got to it.
Yeah.
That really kind of lessened the impact of that.
Yeah.
And definitely lessened the discomfort of your own body betraying you, So it's there, but at a cost.
If they had shown more side effects that were affecting him, slower than they did in the movie, I think it would have been more impacting. But they go by his weight loss ludicrously fast.
Yeah.
In the first bit, and then it kind of slows down after that.
Yeah.
But I agree with that. It was fun.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of that weird middle ground where you're like, I see it.
Yeah.
But and as an adaptation, you're like, yeah, well, they're hitting the points, but again, at a price, of keeping that, feeling of discomfort there. Okay, so let's talk about the characters and the actors portraying them. Again, a big point of the book is that all the people are unlikable, and all the people are really trying to preserve their lifestyle, and for that they are willing to ignore what's happening or what's around them, be it before their bodies are beleaguered by the curse or afterwards. And this is another point that I kind of think, again, it's there, but I think they kind of dropped the ball, and it's in lessening the relationship between our main character and his wife. She was too likable.
Yeah. That's true.
And considering she's unlikable, that says something. But she was too likable in the movie. And in the book, she's the one that's reluctant to accept it's anything but cancer. But it's, again, you get that feeling of willful ignorance.
Yeah.
She knows because of her guilt she's saying it's cancer, because she knows that the curse is real. And you don't get that ever in the movie. Did you?
No.
Did you ever feel that? Yeah, you don't feel that. You do get it from the judge's wife, which was, again, I thought a really good scene.
Yeah.
But other than that,
that, it was kind of like she knew, but at the same time was, like you said, she was kind of ignoring it.
And a good spot. I do think they didn't drop the ball on this one. I think they actually kind of nailed this on the head. But they dropped the ball in another way, and that is with the sheriff. He's pretty much portrayed the way he is in the book, in terms of his reaction to the disease. He's accepted it, but he hasn't learned anything from it. He's just bitter, and he wants revenge, in a matter of speaking. But he also accepts their role in it, and he knows that they're responsible. And it's kind of like a very uncomfortable moment in the book in terms of how we are as humans. But I don't think that came off in the movie. One, because they spoiled how he looked right away because everything was bright.
Yeah, that was weird. There was like a moment where he puts a light on him. Yeah. And it's supposed to be shocking, but I was like, I already saw him.
Yeah, I don't know what that was, man. And we'll get into the aesthetics and cinematography specifically later. But I think it's very apt to mention it now because in the book, it even specifically says everything is fucking dark and you don't see him until he turns. But here you just see him from the get-go. So you're like,
it's odd.
I don't know what that particular directorial choice was, or if the cinematographer was just that shitty, or I don't know what
or
the
if it
fuck.
was like supposed to be we know, but he doesn't, and it's shocking for him.
Yeah.
Even though it's pretty clear that you would be able to see that in if you were there. Yeah, it was weird.
It was very odd.
That being said, it was the Colonel from Malcolm, which was pretty great, and now he's dead, so that's a thing.
So that's cool.
Yep.
But yeah, and I also feel the makeup for him, though decent, didn't really translate the disgusting levels that it had reached in the book. And
he just kind of looked like some
again, but he in the role was fine.
Yeah,
and the scene worked. Now the antagonist, as it were, though again, he's not really an antagonist because you kind of feel some sympathy because his daughter was killed, and that is the head gypsy. What'd you think of him?
He was alright.
And the gyps, as they call him.
I kind of liked him because old gypsies are always kind of fun. That being said, there was some inconsistencies in his scar. Where sometimes it was just a black patch, and then sometimes it was super detailed, which was weird.
Again, a lot of that has to do with the lighting. You know what I'm saying? You could cover variant makeup styles with some good lighting, and then it was just like blatantly, let's just shine this fucking light on his face. It was like
blatantly obvious at times. You're like, oh man, it's just a spot now, and then the next thing it's like freaking a deep cavernous wound. You're like, what is this? But I thought it was cool. He was kind of cool.
Yeah, he is pretty cool. And overall, all his scenes are pretty much, again, as they are in the book. And they came across pretty well. They did add this bizarre dream sequence, which I always kind
of liked it, man.
I always kind of enjoyed that. Nothing like a cackling gypsy behind a 18-wheeler. Yeah, it was great. But, yeah, man, he did a pretty good job. I had a slight problem with Gina, that is the young, beautiful gypsy.
Yeah, I agree.
Because Carrie Werner really acted her out weird. But, whatever.
The accent was really inconsistent.
Yeah, it was clearly not a good accent she was pulling off there. But, yeah, pretty cool overall, those actors. But let's talk about effects, because effects play a big part in what's going on here. And this is kind of a point of contention for even people that like this movie. They either go along with it, or they go, well, that's an effect right there. And it's pretty, every effect is blatantly an effect.
Every character, the main character is pretty much an effect the whole movie.
Yeah.
So that's weird.
I mean, if you want to see the lamest RoboCop go from fat guy to thin guy, then I guess they're kind of cool.
Yeah, I guess.
But otherwise, I mean, they're blatantly effects. I'll say this, for a mid-90s movie...
It wasn't that bad.
It was pretty good, and I'm glad they didn't...
I'll say that the fat effects were the least convincing of his transformation.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't horrible. It wasn't convincing at all, but it wasn't horrible. They did have that... Occasionally, they did have that fat guy seam that most makeups for fat men have, which was a little distracting. But other than that, I thought it was like that was actually lit well enough so that you didn't see the transition between real skin and fake. So I don't know, man. It was alright. It was fake as shit though.
Yeah, the major problem is that they're easily identifiable as prosthetics. And again, that's for horror fans, that's kind of like a thin line to walk. Sometimes that's very cool when you just know they're prosthetics.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, well, they're prosthetics, and that's kind of one of these times where you're like, well, but you go along with it. I did.
Yeah.
I did, And again, it doesn't limit itself to that as he, deteriorates and his peers deteriorate as well in their own specific ways. The effects are either effective or not. I think the most effective is, of course, the judge.
Yeah.
That was a pretty cool effect. It was neat to actually see that versus just hear about it. Even though it was just in a dream.
Yeah.
But,
and had continuity issues.
Mm-hmm.
Where his skin peeling and then they would cut away and then he'd be fully complete again. But then it would cut back and his skin's still peeling.
Yeah.
That was a little... But whatever.
Yeah, but it looked nice.
It was neat. It was a neat effect.
The effect looked nice. Lemke, the old gypsy man, was also an effect. And he looked pretty good. Even though, again, blatantly an effect. And sometimes it was just like, man, you really... shining the lights on that guy to the point where I could just tell that he's an effect versus sometimes where it just was like, oh, he's
like
an old
guy.
man.
Yeah.
You know, so it varies, but it's always kind of like acceptable, you know, which is, I guess, kind of a weird little line to walk. But anyway, let's talk about...
I do want to say that once he, like, the thinner the main character gets, the more he starts looking like Jeffrey Combs, which is weird. And then later on, I was like, man, he looks like Jeffrey Combs. And his voice gets raspier, which I found funny for some reason. Anyway, yeah, just want to throw that one in there. Found that amusing.
Hoot and holler.
Yep.
I don't like the score in this. I'm just going to go ahead and say
honestly,
that.
I don't even remember it.
It's barely there. I mean, it's there, but it's one of those where you're like, well, that was a shitty choice. Or, you know, I wasn't impressed with the score, is what I'll say here.
I don't even remember it.
Apparently it's not memorable, and it definitely isn't. But, you know, since I was kind of trying to focus on other elements to see what was up, just happened to notice it. Nah, not fan of the score. Just gonna say that. Just gonna put that out there. So either you'll notice it,
or apparently won't at all.
Apparently, yeah.
I noticed the little gypsy songs, but that's about it.
Yeah, that's about it. Anyway, one of the notable changes in this is the ending. And I also think this is one where they kind of fucking dropped the ball, because it was kind of like a Lord of the Rings situation. It's like, well, the ending should have been over there, but except in Lord of the Rings it was cool.
Yeah.
In this it was just kind of like, well, just tack on this other extra surprise here, or this guy. Oh, there's somebody at the door.
There's another guy.
Yep. Just keep on killing people with pies.
And then not even show the death, so you're kind of like, all right.
So it's like, all right.
We watched this with our mother, and she was like, what? She was audibly confused.
Yeah, the book ends on a kind of it's more kind of like it ends up being like this twisted morality tale ending, you know, where the daughter ultimately becomes victimized because of his selfishness. He wishes to spare her, but he's also wishing to rub this off on his wife. So it comes off as, you know, this kind of like twist, like Tales from the Crypt-ish twist. Here, they just kind of string that out to include his doctor, which they introduced this affair angle.
Yeah, I guess.
Which was unnecessary, because all they had to do was make his wife as unlikable as she was in the book.
Yeah.
They didn't need to do this affair thing.
It wasn't even like a convincing affair thing.
Yeah,
because it just seemed like it was in his head the whole time.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until he comes in and it's kind of fishy. You're like, oh, I guess they were banging.
Yeah. And in a way, it kind of underlines how much he's trying to rub off this on somebody else, to the point where, it's like he's making it up.
Yeah.
But why would you have to do that when you already just make his wife as unlikable as she is in the book?
Especially when it's heavily implied that it is just on his head at certain points. So you're kind of like, what? Okay.
Yeah, really, to have it just be in his head would have been better.
Yeah.
It would have been, you know, like, oh, he is a selfish prick after all. Nope. It wasn't fair. Yeah, so that was kind of fucking weird.
That was odd. Also, the mafioso should have been Tom Savini.
Okay, I will say this. I have the Janelli character is pretty cool in the book, and he's probably my favorite thing in the book. One, he's the most likable because he's one of the few people in the book that's not lying to himself.
Yeah.
Again, the theme of willful ignorance comes up again, and he's kind of the same way in the movie, but the actor one is not that great.
He's not horrible.
He's not horrible, but he's definitely not great.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't come off as likable. And there's another thing about the mafioso. He has a lot of respect and honor in him. You know, despite who he is, he has a respect for the friendship he has with this guy, and he's willing to do things for him. The thing is that it touches upon it in the movie, but I really wish they would have indulged in it a bit more. There's a point in the book where Billy calls him in, you know, our main character calls him in to help out with this whole situation. First, because he got injured in the hand by the gypsies, but really there's like a, you know, ulterior motive. He's really touching base to see if he could use him as a sense, even though he kind of, again, willfully ignores that about himself. But once he does employ the talents, if you will, of this mafioso, the mafioso literally embodies the white man's curse. He literally is portrayed as the equivalent of a curse because he doesn't want to stop. He enjoys what he's doing, and he has a reason to do it.
Yeah.
So he becomes as unstoppable as the curse.
I guess they said
they said it,
but
and here's the major problem I have with the movie. I'm glad you said it because I'm about to say it. The biggest problem with the movie is that it's so fucking on the head.
Yeah.
Like, they don't even leave anything to subtlety. Now, the book is not a subtle book, but it's not stupidly unsubtle. You know what I'm saying? The movie feels the need to explain everything to you in dialogue.
Yeah.
You know, and that's one of the things that bothers me about the movie, because the book doesn't indulge in that at all, whereas the movie does. Like, oh, I have to say this so that you understand this super obvious thing.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem. So, like you said, they do say that, but
you don't really get the sense.
Yeah, you don't get the sense because they don't really demonstrate it. You don't really visually see it and get the feeling of it. And that's a big problem that the movie does have, and possibly the biggest one I have with it. But anyway, like I said, I still enjoy the movie, and I definitely still... it's not a Pet Cemetery situation where years later I watched it and I was like, well, that wasn't that good, was it?
It's not a very long movie either, so even if you dislike it, you're kind of just going to sit through it anyway. Yeah.
So let's give this final rating. First, we already kind of called this as it's shit, but at least it's enjoyable shit.
Yeah, it was very fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but at the same time, I was like, it's not very good, is it?
Yeah, if you want to see a legitimately good version of this, just see Drag Me to Hell.
Yeah.
I mean, might as well just go.
Or the Mysterious Simpsons one, which might or might not exist.
But let's give it a final rating, man, and final thoughts.
This was kind of hard because of that. Like, it's shitty, but it's very enjoyable. So, like, as a movie, I'll give it like a freaking 4, maybe. But as an enjoyment factor for me, it was kind of like a 6. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't want to give it any higher because it's not a great movie. It
might suggest that this is good.
But it's really fun. I had a lot of fun with it. I don't know if it's worth the price that the Blu-ray is commandeering nowadays. I don't even know if that's the right word. I don't care.
It's taken over, but okay.
It's a rare Blu-ray as well.
Oh. Yes.
But if you can rent it, it was fun.
Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and as an adaptation. That's the hard one for me.
Yeah.
Because it does hit on all the points that it needs to hit, and it's relatively faithful.
Just go on effectiveness.
Yeah.
Of the adaptation.
Though it does touch on everything that the book does, it does it in a kind of stupid way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It really thinks the audience is dumb as fuck. And as a result, some of the stuff comes off as too on the head, as I said before. So as an adaptation, I have to give it a middling 5. And the 5 is just because it does hit on those points. But the negative 5 is because fucking shit, man.
Yeah.
We get it. So yeah, I'll have to give it a middling 5. Enjoyment factor, like I said, I still enjoy this movie. It's fun to watch. So I'll give it a 5 there as well. And as just as a movie in general, yeah, it's not that great. So I'll give it a 4.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of like middling for me, Again, check it out. Make up your own mind about it. I do recommend the book for a very uncomfortable experience. But, yeah.
This was the first for a mix.
Yeah, this was the first mix of shit and hit, I guess. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah. But anyway, this has been Ahab and the Goon Tick. Hit like, share, subscribe. Hit your notifications. Tell us what you think about this movie. And we'll be covering more Stephen King in episodes to come.